Okay,
Are we live?
we're live. Live from Damascus.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Treka. I'm a Syrian stand-up comedian. I do stand-up comedy in Arabic in like bars and nightclubs in Syria. And I also do comedy and political satire on Facebook and YouTube in English. Well, the last 7 years have been devastating. You know, it's not a good feeling to live in a war, you know, to see your country getting destroyed day by day, to see your country get infiltrated by terrorist groups and groups that want to destroy Syria and are killing the people and have a very dangerous ideology that they want to implement in our country. Well, you know, before the crisis, Syria was a very, very safe country. People were able to go out whenever they want. Most of the people never locked the doors of their house. That's how safe
Even
it
in
was.
Damascus.
Yeah, in Syria. Before the crisis, Syria was one of the safest and cheapest countries in the Middle East. People from Lebanon used to come to Syria to do shopping and stuff like that. When the war in Iraq started, people of Iraq came to Syria to live in a safe place. The same thing with Palestine. The same thing with the war in Lebanon in 2006 when...
So you can remember these things.
Yeah, when their countries were dangerous, they came to our country because it was safe. Yeah, Syria was very safe. It was very free. People had the freedom to do and live the lifestyle they want. If somebody wants to be a religious Muslim, there is always a mosque. If somebody wants to be a religious Christian, there is always a church. If somebody wants to go out and go to the bar or to the nightclub, it's also available everywhere.
Yeah.
In every area you go, you will always find a bar, a nightclub, a mosque and a church. They're all together. Mainstream media, because the mainstream media, whenever they want to report about the issue, the problems in Syria, they only show you the crazy people. They show you the jihadists, the people with the beards, with the people that are screaming and fighting and killing and slaughtering people. They don't show you the normal Syrian citizens, the people that are living in Syria. Only because these jihadist groups are funded by outside countries, you know.
Yeah.
Outside countries send them money, they send them weapons, and that's the only reason why they are strong in Syria.
But how does that feel? I mean, I'm trying to imagine. I can't imagine because I haven't lived it. I have no possibility to imagine what it feels to have my own country invaded. You know, in Norway we had one terrorist for the last years. I don't know if you know about Anders Behring Breivik.
I heard that.
Yes, he's an extremist, and he went into an island full of young people, a youth party's summer camp, and he massacred 70 people. And in Norway, people, this is like they say, yeah, we don't want to mention his name. And I'm trying to explain to people, imagine having 150,000
Yes.
like him. I mean,
You see,
how can you describe this in words, the feeling of having your country invaded like
it's
that?
very, very frightening, you know, because even when you're living in a safe area in Syria, like in the center of Damascus, which is under the control of the Syrian government, your life is also in danger because missiles could fall on Damascus city from the areas where ISIS are in control.
Yeah.
They throw missiles to the residential areas. So even when you're in the government areas, your life is still constantly in danger because you could walk in the streets and a missile might fall and take away your life.
Yeah.
And just like you said about the terrorists in your country, it took only one person to slaughter 70 people. And that's what is happening in Syria too. You have like one suicide bomber that will enter a public place and do a suicide bombing and kill 40, 50, 60 people by just one person.
Yeah.
Their ideology is very, very dangerous because they are not interested in living. They are interested in dying and interested in life after death because the religious figures that brainwash these people, they promise them life after death. You know, you go to heaven, you kill the sinners here, you go to heaven, you have your 70 virgins up
but
there
do you
waiting for you.
think they really believe that?
Yes, they believe that, 100% they believe that.
Because it's obviously, I mean, they've been raised in the same modern world as you have and as I have, and it's very strange to imagine that they actually believe it, but
they
obviously
do.
they do. And
but
they are willing to die for it, or they maybe even want to die
Don't forget,
for it.
these people are, they come from extremist background. So they have lived all their life without getting in contact with women. You know, in the areas where ISIS lives, it's very an extremist place. you would find, for an example, maybe most of the women, like now if you go to Ghouta, Eastern Ghouta or Douma, you find that most of the women there are completely covered.
Yeah, I've seen it's like they wear the makeup.
Only the eyes
even
show.
They have gloves.
They wear gloves, only the eyes shows, and they wear sunglasses so that you won't see their eyes. And like, if I don't know if you saw this, there was a video of the women terrorist group in Eastern Ghouta, and you saw how they were all covered in black, wearing the burqa. And what is ironic about this is that these groups, they were saying that we are fighting to bring freedom to Syria, when they themselves don't have freedom, they are oppressed. And this is why the men think about going to heaven to the 70 virgins, because they have lived all their life oppressing women and not getting in contact with women. So, you know, going to heaven, to the virgins, it's something very, you know, they would be interested in doing that. It's a very closed-minded
it
kind
sounds
of person.
completely crazy.
And the good thing that the majority of the Syrians don't believe this. The majority of the Syrians don't have this ideology. But the problem is that these terrorist groups, the reason why they are strong is only because they are funded by outside governments. They are funded by Saudi Arabia, they are funded by Qatar, by America, by England, by France. It's a very dangerous ideology, and terrorism doesn't have any borders. It doesn't have any borders because it's a state of mind. You can brainwash a very moderate person and radicalize his mindset.
Have you seen any examples of that from your own the group of people that you know? Have you seen the radicalization?
Yes,
happen?
I was living in an area called Etsaya. It's in Western Ghouta. It's mostly an Islamic neighborhood.
What does that mean? What does an Islamic? Do you mean like they're mostly
the majority
Muslims?
are Muslims.
Okay.
The majority are Muslims, and before the crisis, I used to hang out in my neighborhood with my friends, and everybody was completely normal. You know, I used to hang out with my friends, and you know, we used to do normal stuff: go play football, go play cards, go to the cafe, you know, play some games. We just had a completely normal life. When the Syrian crisis started, I started having conversation with some of the people that were my friends in Saya, and I was asking them, why are you against the government? What is the main reason why you are against the Syrian government? And they told me that the main reason why we are against the Syrian government is because the majority of the Syrian people are Muslim Sunnis. So why is an Alawi ruling the country? So we want to make Syria an Islamic country. I told him it doesn't matter if the president is an Alawi or a Muslim or a Christian, because Syria is a secular country. If somebody wants to be a religious Muslim, the Syrian government has a mosque for him. If you want to be a religious Christian, there is a church for you. You want to be a guy that parties and goes clubbing and stuff, there is a club, there's a bar. The Syrian government doesn't force women to wear hijab. Right. There are refugees that are anti-Western civilization, and there are refugees that have a dangerous ideology and they're bringing it to Europe. The biggest example is Germany. Germany, you are seeing now a lot of terrorist acts in Germany. You're seeing a lot of extremism happening in Germany. And the reason is because Merkel allowed all the refugees to enter. Now I have to tell you something that is very important and not everybody knows. Not all the refugees that are entering Europe are Syrian citizens. Right. Most of them, not most of them, but they're divided. You have former ISIS members in between the refugees. You have former Al-Qaeda members. You have people from Afghanistan claiming to be Syrian citizens. You have people from Sudan claiming to be Syrian citizens.
Yeah, I've seen videos of that. Actually, you see a guy who doesn't know anything. He's just
a guy that is an African and he's claiming that he's a Syrian citizen, because the German government is very dumb for doing this, because she allowed everyone to enter, and when they enter Germany, they don't have identification to prove who they are. So they just go to the German government and tell them we are Syrian refugees, and the government will give them houses and free salary and all this stuff. The issue, unfortunately, cannot be solved unless the German government and the European government that are funding these groups, they should first stop funding these groups so that the Syrian government can defeat the terrorists in Syria. when the Syrian government defeats all these terrorist groups in Syria, Syria will return into a safe country.
Yeah.
Then, when that happens, all the European countries that are having problem with refugees, they can then send them back to their country, because then these refugees will not have an excuse for why they are staying in Europe, you know?
So you as a Syrian, you actually think that they should send the Syrian refugees back as soon as
100%.
possible?
100%. Because look, I'm going to tell you something. In Europe, there are homeless people. There is unemployment in Europe. And the European governments are giving the priority to the refugees instead of their own citizens. Like for an example, I've spoken to my many German friends, and they told me this. They'll be like, we have homeless people in Germany, we have unemployed people in Germany, but the German government is giving free houses and free money, salaries every month to Syrian refugees, and they're keeping their own citizens in need. So, of course, this is a humanitarian crisis. They can't just tell them, get out of our country. It wouldn't be human. There's no humanity in that action. But the problem why you have a refugee problem in Europe is because of ISIS and Al-Qaeda and the terrorist groups in Syria. And the European government are not helping Syria in solving this refugee crisis. Because
so they're taking with one hand and giving with the other.
Because as long as there is terrorism in Syria, as long as the European government and other countries in the Middle East are funding these terrorist groups, they're sending them money and weapons, the refugee crisis is going to continue.
Yeah.
They're only going to be more and more and more and more. So the solution is for the people of Norway and the people of Europe.
You can tell the Prime Minister of Norway right now.
The solution is to force your government or pressure them to stop funding these terrorist groups and should focus on defeating these terrorist groups in Syria so that Syria can return into a safe country and so that all these refugees can go back to their own country. So when I say ISIS, I mean ISIS, I mean Al-Qaeda, I mean Jabhat al-Nusra, I mean Ahrar al-Sham, I mean Jaish al-Islam. It's all the same ideology. They all want Sharia law. They all want to overthrow the Syrian government. They're all funded by outsiders. They're all terrorists. They're all not supported by the Syrian people. Yes, because the white helmets on camera are humanitarians and behind the scenes are militants. This is what they do. They're the same. There have been videos exposing them celebrating with Jabhat al-Nusra and standing on the bodies of Syrian dead soldiers. So I don't understand, because they claim that they are partial and they're not with any side and all this stuff. If you guys are not with any side, why were you celebrating with Jabhat al-Nusra, which is the terrorist groups, on the Syrian on the Syrian dead soldier? Like now the difference between the Syrian army and the Jabhat al-Nusra and ISIS is that the Syrian army are all Syrian citizens, and they come from every city and every religion and every ethnic background. They're all united and fighting terrorism. But ISIS and Jabhat al-Nusra are not all Syrians. You have people from Afghanistan, from Somalia, from Sudan, from Iraq, from Canada, they're from everywhere. They come from different countries, but like I said, they share the same Wahhabi ideology. So there's a huge difference between these groups and these groups. And white helmets are, like I said, in front of the camera, they're humanitarians and they're saving the lives of the children. So
the people in Syria, they know this.
They know this, of course they know this, because they live in Syria. Exactly. But unfortunately, the people living in the West don't know this, because
that's why you have the opportunity to tell them that.
And I don't blame any European citizen that doesn't know the truth about what is really going on in Syria, because they don't live in Syria, they're getting their news from the mainstream media, and especially when an information is being repeated again and again and again from different channels, different sources, the European people have no other choice than to believe it. But that is why I advise all my European friends to do their own research, to follow independent journalists that are doing their research and their reporting here in Syria. Don't get sources from people living in Europe telling you what is going on in Syria, because they have no idea. Listen, the Syrian government won't put anybody in jail for insulting the government. They would put somebody in jail when somebody becomes a militant, when somebody holds a weapon. And this is not a strategy the Syrian government created. In every single country, any country in the world, any person that holds a weapon kills innocent people, destroys public property, he is considered a terrorist and he should be put in jail.
Yeah.
That is just common sense. In Syria, you can't create a GoFundMe page because of the economic sanctions the West put on Syria. Like in Syria, it's not allowed to have MasterCard or PayPal or
But
Visa
it's
card.
not the Syrian government.
No, it's not the Syrian
Western
government.
sanctions.
No, it's the Western sanctions that allow this. Not only about MasterCard and Visa card, all the American companies and they're not allowed in Syria because of them. They didn't allow it. Whenever they disagree with a country, they try to put sanctions on it to weaken it until the country can't breathe anymore. If they are against Assad, let's say the American government is against President Assad, why are you putting economic sanctions on the people? Like, it's the people that are suffering from the sanctions. It's not the government, The same thing with the funding of terrorists. It's not the government that is putting their lives in danger, It's the people, it's the civilians that are getting hit by the missiles. It's the people that are getting slaughtered. It's the people that are getting oppressed. So if they really care about the people, they should really help Syria. They should stop the war. They should stop funding terrorists. They should stop the sanctions. They should
come here. People should come here.
They should come here to see for themselves.
Yes.
I'm not telling anybody to listen, to believe everything I say or to believe everything she says. Come to Syria and see with your own eyes.
موزون شو ما صار عليك أنا حدك موزون